Welcome back to my channel. This is a Subaru Brumby 1989 model. Has a leak in the radiator, so I'm going to change the radiator. I'm going to get all the old coolant out. So turn the heater all the way on. And the radiator drain plug. Bit of a tight fit down there. There's you don't have to screw it out all the way if you don't want to. It does have a slit there to let the coolant out. This radiator is broken off the mounts there. Take the cap off. I'm just going to give that a minute to drain out. Actually, it looks like it's finished anyway. Wasn't much left in it. So now I'm going to fill the radiator up with water while it's draining out to flush out any old coolant. It's preferred that you use demineralized water to do this, but I have a tank with rainwater in it, so I'll be using that. And because I've installed an overflow bottle, while I wait for that to fill up, I will empty the overflow bottle and give that a little rinse out. And of course the drainer plug's stuck, so I'm going to have to use pliers to undo it. I'm going to put the drainer plug back in, just enough to hold the water for a little bit so I can run the engine to pump out any coolant from anywhere that it might be stuck. Places like the heater box can have a bit of coolant left in it. be enough to get all that old coolant out. The rest of that drainer plug just came off. Now to take the radiator out. Just spraying a little bit of WD-40 on the hose clamps, just so they come undone a bit easier. If I just give that hose a twist, it should come off. Should come off, but doesn't want to. It's been on there a long time. I need a screwdriver just to help that off. The lower one, just down here. Clamp out of the way. Yeah, that one's on there pretty good too. Look at that, still a coolant in it too, which would be because the thermostat didn't open. But that's okay. I'll fill it up and empty it a few more times before putting the coolant in it. That way I'll get all the old coolant out. It'll be a nice fresh lot of coolant through the whole system then with the new radiator. And I nearly forgot to unplug the temperature sensor, which is just down the back here. See if I can get the camera in there better. Right there. That wire just plugs out. That wire just unplugs from the back of it. Just like that. And there's some more wires down there for the thermostat. And there's the plug for that. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that one-handed. Yep, there we go. Thermostat's unplugged. I mean, thermo fan's unplugged. Position that so it doesn't get caught on anything while I lift the radiator out. It should be right to undo and lift it out. Two top bolts are there. These are a 12mm. Don't lose all your bits. that bit wants to stay on there. Now that should just lift out. I forgot to disconnect the overflow line from the overflow bottle. I thought I was caught up on the fan. There's that hole. Right there. Something must have gone through the grill and hit it. I do have video of when it went. So I'll place that right here. I need the electric thermo fan for the new radiator and the fan guard. I'm using a 10mm socket for this. That one was already loose. That one was tight enough to make up for the loose one. All four of them. Now for the sensor. It's going to need a clean. That's the replacement radiator that I will be using. Four holes for the electric thermo fan. I just gave that a bit of a clean up, get some of that mud off. They're not in tight. Having a little bit of trouble getting this one to line up. This piece here is not lining up on here properly. So I might have to file a little bit of the edge off that so it goes around there. It's just on that part there. Now I've filed a bit off of here just so it clears the edge of that tank there, and I've got that on there, and just bend it away a little bit just to give it that little bit extra clearance. Now I'm just starting with that bolt because it was the hardest to get in. Might have to elongate that hole a little bit as well. I have filed that hole as well. This thermo fan does seem to be, its bracket does seem to be a little bit bent. So you might not have the same problem with yours. I've just noticed the part number is also on the end of the radiator. These two hoses are connected to each other. The only time you connect them would be for an automatic. This is a manual, so I will not be using them. Now I'm putting the fan guard on. That's on. Now to put this on, over the side here you have a plastic plug. There are two plastic plugs, one in the end and one in the back. I'll be using this one. It's the same position as the radiator that came out of the car, right above the drain plug. It's a 19mm. And of course I need a 22mm to put that in. Now there's a plug in the radiator cap hole. And on the upper and lower radiator hose points. On the bottom you have the two mounting spots. And on the top, the two bolt hole to mount at the top. The overflow pipe down the side, that will be connected to my overflow bottle because I have put an overflow bottle in. They do not come standard with an overflow bottle. Your two lower radiator mounts. Just there, that is rubber on top of a little metal stem. On the other side, right there, one there and one there. They line up with the holes on the bottom of the radiator. Let's see if I can get the rest of that coolant out by just putting the hose up the radiator hoses. Just let that drain for a bit. And just feeling underneath to get it on them lower mounts. Sure on both sides. Get the upper mount sitting in the proper spots. And make sure it's sitting properly. One of the rubbers were missing from the inside of the mount on that side, because I have the rubber on the outside and one on the inside as well. I don't know when that's gone missing. I had a look around just in case it fell off when I did it. I can't find it anywhere, so it must have already been missing. I went to Bunnings, which is my local hardware store, and picked this up. It's got a heap of tap washers that I'll use later on, but there are 2 rubber washers in there which are approximately the same thickness and size as one of these. So I'll just get them out. So there's 2 there. Approximately the same thickness. Maybe just a fraction thicker. Hole slightly bigger, but close enough. This one will go on the outside. I'll slip them 2 on the inside and put the bolt through. And it should be good to go again. These ones are the 19mm washer out of the pack. That's sitting better. Yep, that's all good. Plugging the wire back in and the thermofan. I'm closing the clamps back up that hold the wire in place for the thermofan. I've got the overflow hose, putting that on. I'll have to get a slightly longer piece of hose later on. It's a little short, but it's not meant to have an overflow bottle, so kind of expect that. It's on there enough for now. Just putting the lower radiator hose on and its clamp, and just tighten up the clamp. Okay, that one's tight. And that one's on, and the clamp. It's in place. Tighten it up. Okay, that one's tight. I'm going to give it a flush out. I'm using demineralized water. I just picked these up at the supermarket. One bottle. Almost 2 bottles. These are 2-litre bottles. But it will go down a bit once I start the car. Cooling in there, not a lot. So it's just got a little bit of green to it. The heater is still on all the way. Try and get any coolant that could be trapped in the heater out. I'm going to leave that for about an hour to cool down, and then I'll let all that water out and then fill it up with coolant. bit over an hour later, I'm going to take the drain plug out of the radiator. This drain plug also has a groove, so you don't have to pull it out all the way. But I took it out all the way because I want anything that might be caught up in there to brush out. The engine is still a little bit too warm to put the new coolant in. I don't want to risk warping a head or doing a head gasket. Sounds like the neighbour shooting. I'm just going to put a little bit more distilled water while the plug's out, just to wash anything that might be sitting in the bottom of the radiator through. That was just the last of that other bottle. So that's 4 litres so far. I'll let that sit and cool a bit more. Yeah, it's still a little bit warm. I'll let it cool a bit more. And if it doesn't get cool before dark, I'll just do it tomorrow morning. I'm going to put the drainer plug back in the overflow bottle. Just leave that loose and leave that loose just to stop anything from going in there. Looks like the radiator stopped running, so I'll put the plug back in. When you're putting the plug back in, because of that drainer groove that's in the thread, just be careful that you don't get a cross thread. If you have to force it, back up and try again, because it does only have a plastic thread on it. You don't want to go destroying the thread. It won't tighten up properly and it'll end up leaking. I'll come back and check that in a little bit, see if it's cooled down enough to put the coolant in. It's still a little bit warm. When the water started moving around in the radiator is when the engine got hot enough for the thermostat to open. So that would have flushed all the extra coolant out of the heater box and various other parts of the engine that didn't get a flush out before, because I didn't let it get hot enough to open the thermostat. That's why all the extra coolant started coming through. And it's still a little bit too warm to risk putting the new coolant in, and it's going to get dark soon, so I'll leave it until morning and I'll refill it when it's cold. I'll just twist the radiator cap one click and just tighten that up a little, just so nothing gets in there with all the bugs and mice overnight. I'll come back to it in the morning. It is the next morning. I'm going to mix up some coolant. This is the coolant I will be using. I'm mixing it with demineralized water. 2 empty bottles from yesterday. You can buy the coolant already mixed. I prefer mixing my own. I will be doing a 50-50 mix. These are 2 litre bottles. This has a measurement on the side. So I'm putting 1 litre of coolant. Putting the coolant bottle on the ground so I can see how close I am to the litre. Litre there. Top it up the rest of the way with demineralised water. Mix it up a little bit. That's ready to go in. Never take your radiator cap off when it's hot. It will spit coolant out everywhere. The radiator would be under pressure if it was hot. That's 2 litres. I'm putting the cap on so it doesn't start spilling out. I'm going to start the engine for a couple of seconds just to mix all the coolant round, bring any air bubbles out to the radiator. not long enough to start getting hot. Just to try and get some of them bubbles out. Now I'll mix up some more coolant. Just made up another 2 litres of coolant. Same as before, 1 litre of coolant, 1 litre of demineralised water. You can use distilled water as well. And because I've got an overflow bottle, I'll put some in there as well. The overflow bottle is just so when the engine and radiator heat up, instead of dumping all the coolant down onto the ground and then sucking air back, it puts it into the overflow bottle and then sucks coolant back. Now I will run the engine, let it warm up, check for any leaks to see if the radiator hoses need to be tightened, anything like that, or any of the other connections that might need to be tightened up a little bit. Seems to have a little bit of a leak coming from the sensor on the radiator. Might have been a good idea to put a new fibre washer on that while I was going. It's a bit hard to get the camera down into there, but it's that sensor that sits next to the electric thermofan, which is a 22mm. Need a longer extension. I'll dry that off. I'll check it again, make sure it's not leaking. I'll plug the wire back in, start it back up. Still have the heater on as far as it'll go. Careful not to get too close to the fan or the fan belt while you're doing this. Just checking the overflow bottle to see if it's blowing any bubbles. As it warms up, it will blow air into the overflow bottle. Showing about a quarter on the temperature gauge. Quite warm now. Temperature gauge is showing a bit over a quarter. It's been running for approximately 20 minutes. That's what the temperature gauge is showing. The radiator cap opening, started letting air out. radiator. As it cools down, all that air will be sucked back with replacement of coolant. Can't see any more leaks. Check where the temperature's at. Looks like this job is pretty much done. I'll take it for a road test. When it cools down, I'll make sure the overflow bottle still has coolant in it, that it hasn't sucked all of it back, and I will make sure that the radiator is still full of coolant. Then after that, I will only be filling it up from the overflow bottle. It's all looking good. You can hear the air bubbles going into the overflow bottle. Hope this helps. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.